Good evening and welcome to a special edition WildUte University Live for all the members of the College Football Mafia family. We recently passed a milestone here on the College Football Mafia Network. Over 200 members total. Thank you to everybody who has continued to become members. Thank you to everybody who has gifted members. This stream is a special reward for hitting that goal. We're going to talk about the Carolina Reaper tonight. We're going to talk about financials and data points and everything that is super exciting with the one, the only, the professor, WildUte. How are you doing tonight, WildUte?
I am doing great. This is such a fun live show and a super important topic too. I can tell all of our members out there that we're going to go over some stuff that nobody else is going to be able to break down. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about the implications. We're going to chat a lot about this North Carolina situation and look at how much upside or perhaps downside there is looking at a conference like the SEC for the Carolina Tar Heels, what that means for the ACC after the fact. There's so much to get into. This is a video that really was made special for you guys, though, because over 200 members, we're so honored for that and everything. Spent all weekend working on this stuff, hours and hours spending time. This is some real deep financial concepts here. So if I was like a CFO of a company and we are like on the financing team, this is the kind of stuff that we'd be breaking down. This is exactly what the trustees for North Carolina are eventually going to see, some iteration of this type of analysis. So this is how it's done. We're going to get right into it. And after I call some people out, let's shout out some people.
Let's give some shout outs to people. And remember, you guys are going to be the first to see this. Everybody wants to know what the number is. What's the magic number? You are finding it out because you are members of the College Football Mafia family. Stormy Cyclone is in attendance. Good to see you, Stormy Cyclone. Long-time member. Long time. Conundrum, Mr. Iowa Hawkeye. Could be a death blow to the ACC. Hope Jim Phillips is a member. If we could gift them to specific people, I would gift one to Jim Phillips.
Oh, gosh, no doubt.
Daniel Kopcha, when's the bubble pop on the security the ACC thought they had from the settlement with FSU Clemson?
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Would a similar thing apply for UNC to the Big Ten? That's a good question. Wait till we get into it. We're just going to say hello to some people. I will star that one. We will come back to that.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. Daniel Gygax, Just the Facts with Dan Gygax. He is in the chat. Thanks for stopping by, Dan. Thanks for being a contributor here on the network. Penn State Nittany Lion, Bob Swanger is here in the house. Good to see you, Bob. Jay Chapman says, no SEC expansion without North Carolina. That sounds familiar. I don't know who originated that, but it sounds familiar. We got a super chat. We appreciate that, Opie.
Thank you, Opie.
Give you a little let's dance a little bit.
Give him the oh my gosh. There's the Carolina Reaper right there, and you're gonna see why in a second. Thank you, Opie. It's an honor, and this show is just for you guys, honestly. That's so generous of you and everything, but really we wanted to give you the best type of content. This is the best I can give you, what we're going to break out here and stuff. So we'll slow it down too. Moen's going to stop me and stuff so we can really break out some of these ideas when we get into the analysis. And we'll try to keep it so it's understandable too. But much appreciated that super chat.
Absolutely, Opie. And since Greg promoted the show earlier, I'll give you a little oh. Thank you, Opie.
Carolina Reaper's bad. That's so bad, Moen.
We got it. We got to keep rolling, and we're rolling here. This way, we can get into the numbers, and you can confuse me because you were a math magician. Illini Ted's in the chat. Good to see you, Illini Ted. Thanks for coming in. Steele Austin is here. Good to see you, Steele Austin, a fellow you. Mr. Ed Wayner, Carolina Reaper Show. I hope it's spicy. Go Houston Cougs.
Go.
Caleb Ramirez, hi all. Thanks for whoever gave me this membership. Absolutely. If you got a gifted membership, make sure you give that person a thank you. If you're joining the chat, I don't know if they'll remember who they gave them to, but I can tell you something. MBM, he gifted 10 memberships the other night, so it might have been him. So maybe give thanks to MBM. Here's a new one. I don't believe I've seen this one before. DXRHELTL.
Stopping in.
I
Absolutely.
don't even know how to pronounce that. So I'm just going to call you D. Thanks for stopping in, D.
Yep.
Sergeant Pickles is in the house. Good to see you, Sergeant Pickles. Daniel Gorby is here.
Hey.
The almighty Finn is here. Hey, Moen, you should be in Indianapolis today. Yeah, well, I got to work. I apologize. Friends Call Me Sean is here. Can't wait to hear what you got to say. Our Webb is here. Lee is here. You just zip through here. I know we've got some people coming in late. Tumasta is here.
Yeah, we got to start some of these comments.
I think. Yep. I'm going to start starting comments, but
yep.
All right, guys, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Let's figure out what the magic number is for the Carolina Reaper.
All right, the Carolina Reaper. Hey, make the Reaper dance real quick while we get into this too. So this analysis is.
Let's do a little music. What little?
What is this, Mo? You kill me, man. All right, here we go. With anything, a lot of words here. Get it, totally get it. But we need to break out a couple things here. So with any type of financial model, there's going to be assumptions. That's just part of the game here. I'm just laying out the playing field before we get into it. We're going to get to the numbers after. We will have numbers. We'll have what that means and everything. We got to lay the foundation for that. And so the assumptions are right here. So in my view, this analysis is the best freaking case for UNC to stay in the ACC. So in other words, it's not biased towards the SEC, and this analysis is with the UNC staying in the ACC versus considering going to the SEC. So best case scenarios. So there's a little bit more bias on the conservative side for UNC to stay in the ACC. First big idea. The brand initiative is a thing that we'll talk about a lot. If you all don't recall, that's a new type of payout format that the ACC has, where 60% of the Tier 1 rights are going to be going to schools that get the highest viewership based on this Florida State and Clemson settlement. 40% of the Tier 1 rights will be paid out in guaranteed payments to all the members if you're not named SMU, Cal, or Stanford, but all their traditional historical ACC members. And so that's important because that's going to go in some UNC figures here. So we're including the brand initiative adjustments here for 60% viewership, 40% guaranteed. Okay, so now we're going to get into more of like, hey, things that kind of are specific to the model that we're going to be looking at. So in general, it's consensus that 80 to 75% of all like weight for a media contract is from football, with 20 or 25% at most for basketball. That's kind of common knowledge that's been mentioned by the likes of your Bob Thompsons and a lot of other reporters. The ACC is a very good basketball conference, so there's a little bit more weight on the basketball side. So what we're saying here is that 75% of the brand initiative viewership is going to come from football and 25% is coming from men's basketball. Make sense? You still with me?
Yeah, absolutely. So the value you're putting, the value is weighted more towards football by 3 to 1.
Exactly. Yeah, like 4 to 1. Yeah, exactly. 75% to 25%, exactly. So then moving down here, so we're going to get it more into this, but football viewership share is basically what percentage of the football viewership, all the eyeballs over the last 5 years, weighted. That means that like there's each year in the past is less relevant than the current year. UNC's share of all the football viewerships, 5.8%. We're going to show that a little bit more in the next piece of analysis here. We're actually going to break out every single viewership share for all the ACC teams. Nobody's put this out. I've never put this out. This is basically the football related stuff. You're going to want to see this here. It's coming up in the next slide. So 5.8% is what UNC gets in football viewership over the last 5 years when you weight it out. That's about average for the conference. If you look at like the baseline average, there's 17 teams that we're looking at. We're throwing Notre Dame out. They're not in this. And if you divided 1 by 17, the average would be about 5.8%. meaning that UNC is kind of on that average mark, not the median mark, but the average mark. Anyway, so laying that out, football viewership share. Okay, so the basketball viewership share here. Basketball viewership's hard to get, for one. I've got some of the information there, but there's a lot of games that Nielsen doesn't record for basketball, so it's kind of a cluster. I am making an assumption, a big-time assumption that's weighted towards the ACC here, that's saying that UNC, who's the biggest basketball brand in the ACC along with Duke, is getting a massive 15% of all the basketball viewership for the entire conference. And if you're looking at the average teams getting about 5.8%, that means that UNC is getting about 2.6 times that in this model, in this analysis. So that's why it's so best case scenario for the ACC here, is because the basketball viewership assumption I'm making here is so strong for UNC, okay?
Absolutely. So this is best case scenario for the ACC.
Yep.
We've knocked it out. So you're actually going to be, your number might be a little more conservative based off of that, but it's still going to be somewhat accurate as we can be, because we have to make some guesstimations here. Nielsen, certain networks don't use Nielsen ratings, so it's really hard to judge basketball viewership. So we're going on best guess. We'll go with it. Let's move on.
15%. Moving on. Okay, so when you're factoring all together, the total viewership share that Carolina's getting is about 8.1%. We'll lay that out here. Let's get a Reaper guy dancing real quick while we're moving on here. Because this is what you're seeing right here is a pretty valuable illustration. This has not been produced by anybody else. I think that once this gets maybe posted on social media, people are very interested in seeing this. But this is the 5-year, not the 11-year, the 5-year weighted football average viewership shares. So when we're talking about like the new brand initiative on the football side, which is going to be the vast majority of that brand initiative, these are the percentage of shares that each school is going to get in that brand initiative on the football side for the ACC. So Clemson over the last 5 years has had the most Nielsen rated viewership, slightly edging out Florida State, basically right there the same. And then you can see down the list, Miami's lower, Georgia Tech's up there because of some big time games over the last couple of years. UNC's a little bit above the median point of 5.8%, and then all the way down to SMU, including some American games at about 2.4%. But basically, these are kind of like the payouts. A lot of like the weight of the payouts and everything is going to be based on something like this for the ACC brand initiative, because this is the football viewership share. And just to show everybody that that's where these numbers are coming from. UNC 5.8%. That's the big takeaway here. Make sense, Mon?
Absolutely. And just make sure we're clear on this. There are certain games that are not included due to Nielsen not being able to have rating numbers for ACC Network games and et cetera.
So happy you pointed that out, because in these numbers you're seeing every single non-Nielsen rated game gets a automatic 150,000 viewers. I made an adjustment for that to account for that factor, because your schools like Boston College don't get on a Nielsen rated channel very often. But I'm making the assumption here with these percentages that any type of game on the ACC Network or non-Nielsen rated channel gets 150,000 viewers.
Okay.
All of them. And so these actually are going to be pretty accurate at the end of the day. And again, they're weighted, so there's more bias towards recent years. These are going to be pretty sound when we're looking at football viewership shares. And the important one, again, is for UNC in this analysis, 5.8%. Okay?
All right.
All right, here we go. So this might this is how we get the total brand initiative share of 8.1%, which is important. So what we're saying here is that the football viewership share is 5.8%. We just talked about that last. It's weighted at 75% because the media contract with the ACC is probably weighted around 75% in football. And when you do the hard math on that and the hard math on the assumption for basketball, you're getting a Carolina brand initiative share. That's how much of all of the tier one pot Carolina is going to be getting, 8.1%. That's the assumption here, based on the math that we've talked about.
Absolutely. And that's just based off viewership now, not viewership in the future, because we can't guess that.
Can't guess that. So this is based on a 5-year look back on football viewership, weighted, and then also the basketball assumption, which is very, very, again, ACC heavy biased, in my opinion. So good for ACC. All right. So 8.1%, that is a key number here that we need. All right. So some of you might have seen this before. A lot of numbers here. This was the bare bones ACC payouts. This was from a video done by Tomahawk Nation, Jeff Fuller, and myself roughly about a month ago. These are the best ACC barebone payouts without any type of brand initiative adjustments that are out there. These are realistic based on all the assumptions made in that video and the discussion in that video. But this is basically what any given ACC team was expecting before the brand initiative changes came out through the settlement a couple weeks ago. So these are including your ESPN Tier 1 money, your ACC Network money, and then also your college football playoff money. All the media rights monies that you're going to be getting, this is the total amount that you're expecting to get over the next 10 years, starting in the year 2026, already in 2025. UNC ain't leaving, and they're not going to be in the SEC in 2025. It's going to be later. 2026 is the soonest that could happen. But it just needed to lay it out there. This is what these figures came from a prior video about a month ago, because this was pretty sound analysis that had happened in that video. Any questions about this, Moen, or any questions in the comments or anything? I don't want to slow it down. I know we're talking about a lot of
let's get to we'll get to some comments right now. We've got some comments starred from our members. Daniel Kopsha wants to know, would a similar thing apply for UNC to the Big Ten U?
The similar type of analysis that we're doing here would apply for Big Ten as well. The key difference with that is I'm not sure that the Big Ten could offer UNC a full membership share, given the situation they've got with Oregon and Washington. Because if you brought North Carolina in and made them a 100% share member without a 50% share, you'd have to make everybody whole. And so it's much more of a cash windfall, and you'd also have to get the media partners on board, like Fox, to sign a pro rata for North Carolina. So there's a lot more hoops to jump through for UNC to get in the Big Ten than the SEC. The SEC has a straight line pro rata. The SEC with ESPN, they can grab any school they want and they automatically get pro rata day one. That's how their contract reads with ESPN. And so it's a lot easier as far as like a negotiation with the SEC than the Big Ten. Doesn't mean that the Big Ten's out of the game for UNC. Just means there's a lot more hurdles. Do you want to expand on that, Moen?
Yeah, I would just add one caveat to that. The Big Ten can give them a full membership, but it would require Notre Dame to join the Big Ten Conference.
Yeah, there you go.
Notre Dame has a contractual rate that covers one full share and then 3 additional full shares should they join the Big Ten. So that would, Ute is absolutely right. That would have to be the situation. The Big Ten is going to have to get more money, make Oregon and Washington whole members, or Carolina's going to have to accept a half membership. And I don't think the SEC, like you said, is going to offer them a half membership. It's going to be all of it.
The SEC will offer North Carolina full membership. They want them that bad. The number one target out there. That's very realistic there. It's very unrealistic to think they're going to get a half share, quarter share, or whatever. Come
on. MBM has got his milk ready. Thank you, MBM. You gifted some of these memberships here, so
absolutely
glad that you could help us out and help these people out. Enjoy that milk.
Enjoy that milk.
Lee says UNC sure has been talking up the SEC lately. Of course.
Yeah, we're about to find out why.
We
are about to find out why.
We need a U on the Mafia emojis. I think we're 19 members away for unlocking our next emoji. And then we'll put that under consideration. We'll just do a regular U. I'm not going to make it a Utah U or...
Hey, make it a Utah U.
Anything like that. Friends call me Sean. If UNC can't shake the backpack, whose spot do they take? UVA, Florida State, or Clemson?
What do you think about that, Moen?
I think there is going to be either a backpack kickback or Carolina money. Take your pick. I think North Carolina State will be separated from North Carolina at this point. And I think North Carolina State can't be any worse for wear than they are right now. And UNC is going to have to take care of them. Got to pay the kid.
Yeah, that's part of this too. We're going to break that out. Let's jump forward a little bit more. We'll take more comments along the way.
Yep.
But I think that's laying the foundation. Give everybody a little mental break there before we get into the analysis a little bit more. Okay, so here are the bare bones ACC payouts. Again, we talked about that. Okay, something new here. So these are the Carolina estimated payouts. This is specific to North Carolina, not the ACC anymore. And how this ESPN Tier 1 number, it's different than the last. So check it out. Like, for example, this is the last slide here. The ACC payouts for Tier 1 in 2026 were about $22.7 million. The Carolina payouts anticipated to be at $27.9 million based on a higher brand initiative than your average ACC school. So they're getting paid more because they get more weight in the brand initiative. They get more eyeballs on their football and basketball, as we've already talked about. Okay. So these are the Carolina specific payouts for the next 10 years. When you're factoring in the brand weight that we've discussed already because of the viewership shares they had. So when you're taking a look at these Carolina payouts, of course, they're better than the ACC average. They're way better than like some of the schools in the ACC that have low viewership. Those are going to be a lot worse numbers than we're looking at here. Carolinas are better than average for the average ACC team. Now, this one's going to be crazy. Here are the SEC payouts. Okay, so based on the media contract that was fairly recently signed by the SEC, here is your average payout per year for any baseline SEC school. We're not talking, there's not going to be a lot of difference. It's not a brand initiative in the SEC. Everyone's getting the same amount of type of money here with their baseline payouts. And they get a lot more college football playoff money, and they get a lot more Tier 1 money. That should say ESPN. Sorry, the Fox part's in there. I should have removed that. This is just an ESPN Tier 1 contract for the SEC. And it's substantially more than the ACC is paying out in Tier 1 and plus ACC Network revenue. So this is what your average SEC team's getting for the next 10 years, estimated out, projected out.
Right. And I think it's important to keep in mind, and we point this out, that the SEC is currently negotiating with ESPN to add a 9th conference game.
Yeah,
that is going to increase their payout. And they are negotiating with the Big Ten for a scheduling agreement, which will again increase their payout. So the Big Ten
and Netflix is interested in getting content too for SEC, which none of those factors are even included in this model.
Right. So I mean, we're seeing there's already a gap between the ACC and the SEC on the base rates. That gap is going to widen very shortly. So it's just something we should keep in mind.
100%. And here is the gap. This gap will widen, as you mentioned, Moan, for those 3 factors and more. But this is unadjusted, so we haven't made any type of adjustments yet. We will get there. But this is just kind of the raw numbers every year for the next 10 years. This is the gap that Carolina's looking at versus the baseline SEC school. So in 2026, your media rights gap through your Tier 1 and your college football playoffs you're going to be in a gap of around $29 million starting in 2026, 2027. That's widening. It keeps widening every year because the ACC network is going to lose value over time. It's based on cord cutting. And so you're in a pickle right here. This is exactly why you need to consider getting out of the ACC, is just looking at this number right here. This are gap numbers, because it's substantial every single year and it adds up to huge amounts. What are your thoughts on that, Moan?
Yeah, I think the important thing to keep in mind is for the halves in the ACC, that gap isn't going to be as bad. But there's still going to be a gap. I mean, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, they're still all going to be at a gap. And again, look, being down, 20, 30, being down almost 40 million, how can you compete? You can't.
UNC is one of the haves. We're saying that they have an 8.1% viewership share, whereas the average ACC school would have a 5.8. Like we're
Absolutely.
talking like
Yeah. But I mean,
this
the
is what
other,
the haves get, man. Like they're still down that much.
right. But the other thing you got to remember is Florida State, Miami, and
Yeah.
Clemson all get their numbers baked in, as Greg
Right.
Pflugar puts it, because they have that scheduling agreement with Notre Dame.
Yes. And like Florida State and Clemson's number, because of the heavy football viewership share, their numbers will be better than UNC's. So the gap will be shallower, but still, like, I mean, there's going to be a massive gap for every single one of the ACC schools. And my goodness gracious, if you are a Pitt or you're a Virginia Tech, it's really bad.
Yeah, I mean,
Like the caps.
it's great news for those few brands at the top there in the ACC right now. But when the SEC and the Big Ten get a pay bump from their partners, the gap's just going to expand again. So
Exactly. Great point. Great point. So that's just showing the raw gap. Okay. All right. So here we go. We're going to apply some finance concepts and try to keep it so it's understandable if you haven't ran into this before. But in the finance world, there's an idea about the future value of money being worth less than today's value of money. So it's called like the present value. And like think about it. Okay, so $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow or $1 in 10 years, and that makes sense because of inflation and other things that happen, right? That it eats away your ability to buy things in the future with the same dollar you have today. So your dollar's worth less in the future than it is today. Make sense, Moen?
absolutely, total grandparent math right there. Used to be able to buy, ice cream for a nickel.
Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of idea here. So what you're seeing here with these numbers is discounted future payouts for both UNC and the SEC every single year over the next 10 years. And so we're using a discount rate of 7%, which actually means like the expected return on an investment, and UNC would be investing and jumping over to the SEC in this case. And this is the erosion of how much those future contractual payments are going to be in every year. Hopefully that makes sense. You want to break that out a little bit more, Moen, or ask any more questions to clarify that?
No, I think you covered it. Again, I fall back on grandparent math.
It's grandparent math, and like every year, it's just like your future dollars that you're anticipating. Like if we go back to the last slide, like look in 2035, like the raw numbers say that North Carolina is going to be making $61.5 million, okay, in 2035. When you look at like what present value in 2035 of that money, like what's it worth in today's dollars? In 2035, it's actually worth $31.3 million in today's dollars because 10 years down the road, the money's eroding. Grandparent math. Okay.
Right.
So when you break out all of those cash flows that are happening for the SEC and UNC every year, and you add them all up, you get what's known as a present value figure. That's how much the investment or the cash flows are worth today. So like all of like the 10 years of ACC payouts that we're talking about are worth around $391.3 million for UNC. If you add it all up and stuff over the next 10 years in today's terms, in today's dollars, it's worth $391 million bucks. Okay. You apply the same type of mechanics to the SEC, it's $654 million. Okay.
Gotcha.
So the difference when you're subtracting 654 million by 391 is 262 million point nine or $263 million. So what that's saying that is in today's dollars, a decision to jump to the SEC for UNC is worth in the positive $263 million over the course of the next 10 years in just media rights payouts. $263 million. We are not talking here about benefits with ticket sales, with private capital, with corporate sponsorships would all get benefits being in the SEC. This is strictly just media rights money. We're not even considering any type of Netflix add-on for the SEC scheduling agreement. That number that you're seeing, that $263 million, will get worse before it gets better. That's best case
Absolutely.
scenario.
This is the most conservative number you can give.
Yeah, exactly. It's $263 million difference. So let's use that $263 million, and that would be known in the finance world as your net present value of like the consideration to join the SEC for UNC. And then let's subtract out the ACC exit fee of 165. You look at the right side of the screen. And really, what's left over is the SEC upside of around $98 million, even after you pay the SEC ACC exit fee of 165. So $98 million you still net out after paying the exit fee if you can get out as soon as possible. Okay. So the big idea here is that if you're UNC, the best time to get out of the ACC is today. The next best time to get out of the ACC is tomorrow, assuming that you have the SEC invite, which is understood to be true at 100% revenue distribution. And the next best day is in 2 days. And really, time is of the essence. There is a point in time here in 2028. I didn't break it out visually, but the most ideal time for UNC to get the best financial upside in any given year under the current structures of the contracts is in 2028, Moan. Okay. So that means that UNC, if they want to get the best financial benefit, they have to be in the SEC. They have to be playing in the SEC and getting paid in the SEC by 2028.
Okay, so that's
a big takeaway here.
That's the sweet spot. 2028.
It's not just a sweet spot. It's almost like the requirement. You have to be in by 2028. You want to get in as soon as possible because there's benefits getting in earlier and stuff because it grows. But if you get in after 2028, you really start losing some of the benefit. 2028 is kind of like that absolute drop dead. You have to be in the SEC by 2028. Like, it's great if you can get in as soon as possible in 2026, 2027. But 2028 is like, we have to be in there for financial purposes.
So the latest they could notify would be August 15th of 2027.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you could say it that way. So let's move on here. Some of you that are the college football mafia membership world for a long time will remember this illustration here. This is the Wolfpack Backpack. The Wolfpack Backpack is something we've been talking about for, over a year, it seems like. And one of the issues with UNC getting out of the ACC is the political entanglement with NC State. We've had a lot of conversations around this. A lot of our community knows a lot about it too. But here's an interesting thought, okay? So as we talked about, after you pay the ACC exit fee, the benefit for joining the SEC in the media rights world for UNC is $98 million. $98 million is really what you get. Hey, if you wanted to just break even on that number over the next 10 years, you could theoretically pay NC State about $10 million in Wolfpack Backpack tax, or Carolina, whatever you wanted to call it, tax to NC State for 10 years and still break even on media rights if you go to the SEC in 2026. Okay. And so so we're talking about how much it would cost, like, to pay NC State. You can afford and break even in the long math by paying out almost roughly $10 million to NC State as you are in the ACC right now. That's how significant this is, like these gaps that we're talking about. So when we're talking about the political entanglement, I would imagine that the tax is going to be part of the conversations, kind of like Cal and UCLA and the calimony that they're getting from UCLA joining the Big Ten. I think that we're going to be seeing some Wolfpack Backpack tax up to $10 million. I would bet that North Carolina would want to make it around $5 million, but it could get up to $10 million based on the math here.
Absolutely. And that would put North Carolina State in a tremendous position because we know they're a target of the Big 12. They would get a full Big 12 payout and then $10 million more annually than other Big 12 teams. So that could be something that that could cause them to loosen that backpack a little bit and let North Carolina go to the SEC. Just give them that Wolfpack kickback.
It's the sweetener. It's how you get it done, and that leads us into really kind of the end in analysis, like you're saying, Moan. Here's the North Carolina power struggle hierarchy. This is on the College Football Mafia page. It was posted. It just shows the convoluted, complex nature of this situation for UNC. So it shows the power dynamic going up and up and up. And it starts the lowest level of the power dynamic for realignment decision for UNC starts at Bubba Cunningham, AD. That moves up to the Chancellor Lee Roberts. His boss is essentially Peter Hans, who's responsible for the UNC system, which is 17 public schools in the whole entire state. And we're just talking about one of those public schools being UNC Chapel Hill. So Peter Hans is responsible for 17 public schools, including North Carolina State. And if you're looking at who Peter Hans rolls up to, that's the UNC System Board of Governors. And then lastly, who do they roll up to is the North Carolina General Assembly of 170 elected representatives in the state. So you can see there's a lot of hands in the pot here, a lot of decision makers. And at the end of the day, the General Assembly is going to have a lot to say about where any school goes, including North Carolina. And I think how North Carolina needs to strategically get this done, this is just my view, my opinion here, is I think that they need to pay out Wolfpack Backpack tax of up to 5, 7, max $10 million based on the long math. And they need to try to work, or they need to figure out how to get NC State into the Big 12. I don't think that you can leave NC State in the ACC and just jump to the SEC because there's going to be such instability with the ACC. And plus, no one knows for sure if there's going to be a contract adjustment from ESPN if Big Brands leave. Like then the ACC contract, that's a huge question mark. And the uncertainty there, I think that the NC State Wolfpack need to basically have a shirt up spot in the Big 12 to get this done at the end of the day. Like a promise, a handshake, a done deal. I don't know, but I think that the General Assembly, the UNC System Board of Governors, Peter Hans, everybody else involved is going to want to make sure that NC State is in a stable place for UNC to jump to the SEC with backpack tax.
Okay, that brings up a question from me. What does North Carolina State's going to have to stay in the ACC for a certain period of time? Does NC State have the resources to pay $165 million in an exit fee?
So a couple things with that. If somebody breaks out, will the exit fee remain $165 million? Nobody has answered that question. I would wager that actually you can make a legal argument that the value of the conference is eroded to a place where that's going to be lower. So that's one part of it. I think there's that aspect of it. And then also, here's another way to think about it too. Instead of paying annual backpack tax, maybe you upfront a bunch of money if you're UNC to NC State to pay that fee to get over to the Big 12. Or you figure out some means of doing that, of getting payment out to go into the Big 12 by paying out a lot of the future money you're going to get from the SEC and media rights. I think there's ways to strategically work that, but that's a mystery right now. And that's what they're going to have to talk about. Those conversations, we don't know if they've had those yet. I think the General Assembly level, the Board of Governors level, and everything like we're talking about. These are conversations that are going to happen extremely soon because there's massive incentive, as you've seen with the numbers, for UNC to go to the SEC. Even after the ACC exit fee, you're talking about almost $100 million difference in just media rights. If you're factoring in ticket sales, private capital, everything else that we've talked about, that could balloon up to $250, $300 million possibly, I think. And so it's a huge play. It's a long-term play. It's good in the short term, the long term. It's a no-brainer. If you're NC State, you just have to figure out how to maneuver this power struggle.
Yeah, got to make a lot of people happy in the state of North Carolina to pull this off.
Yeah, like there's 170 representatives, 24 members of the Board of Governors, Peter Hans. Yeah, I mean, you're talking
Roberts.
Like almost 200 people. Got to make them happy, and they're not all UNC Chapel Hill grads. Most aren't. Like most are coming from NC State, Wake Forest, other places, right? And so there's a lot of hands in the pot here. You got to figure out how to sweeten it for NC State, because that's the one public school that's going to be most impacted by the move to the SEC, because it's functionally going to blow up the ACC when this happens, as we know it. When UNC jumps, the ACC is dead in a lot of ways. It's like a significant power level conference, in my view. So I do think. Oh my gosh.
And there is the Carolina Reaper waving goodbye to the ACC.
Oh my gosh. So there you have it. We talked a lot about these different concepts, the long math, how we got there, what it means, how it needs to happen if you're UNC, like for survival. Like even Greg Flugar on the show earlier today talked about like UNC's like biting their fingernails because they're going to have to cut sports. They're in debt, like they're in budget deficits. You know, they've got Bill Belichick. How the freak are they going to pay him? You're not going to do it in the ACC. You're going to do it in the SEC. And I think that they're playing the game to deal with this power struggle right here of going into having these massive deficit shortfalls to make an easy argument that we need the money from the SEC just to break even or get close to break even.
Absolutely.
Sure,
and you brought up a great point. If you guys didn't catch Greg's show earlier, his earlier live stream today, go watch that and then realize that this is kind of the end piece to it. This is the cap on it. It's a very long article written by the Assembly, I believe is the name of the newspaper. Very, very in-depth on the financial struggles at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I think Ute's presentation here is the perfect end cap on that story of why the North Carolina Tar Heels, they gone. They gone.
They have to go. They have to go. It's a no-brainer from everybody inside that building to go to the Power 2. In fact, you have to do it to compete. I mean, you're already at these deficits, and we're talking about massive windfalls of money coming from the SEC and a lot of different sources. It's a must. And I think at the end of the day, the pressure is going to be so great on the General Assembly, Board of Governors, Peter Hans, that they're going to have to bend and realize that. But again, how do you sweeten it for NC State? How do you get NC State certainty in a conference like the Big 12 where they can have some stability too?
All right. Very interesting stuff, Ute. I think that was a great presentation. I'll give you a little round of applause. And a reminder that Ute is the milkman.
I am the milkman. My milk is delicious.
Now let's go ahead and
get to some comments.
Get to some member comments here.
Yeah.
From our friend Sergeant Pickles. At a minimum, UNC, FSU, Clemson, and Miami are gone. That's a great point, I know it's just an educated guess at this point. UNC leaves for the SEC. Who goes with them? What happens to UNC? What happens to FSU, Clemson, and Miami, Georgia Tech, et cetera, et cetera?
Miami likely does move maybe next, right? Miami seems like the next mover after UNC leaves first. Or maybe even Miami could be the wedge at the end of the day. I mean, Miami, if we broke out the same type of analysis for Miami, they're going to have a higher viewership share. They're going to get more ACC payouts than UNC. But still, the math's going to be stupid bad versus the Big Ten or the SEC. The question for Miami, I still think Miami is going to be a Big Ten school like you do, Mo. We both agree on that. I don't know how the math looks like if you get a 50% share.
Right.
That's the question. 100% share, the math's going to work out great. At 50%, it probably still will, but I just haven't broke out the numbers yet. Miami might be the first mover, though, if they get an offer from Big Ten.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I would just bring up, what about the fear of missing out? Yeah, you're not going to make as much money at a half share as some of your colleagues, but you get a guaranteed spot in the quote-unquote Power 2. So
with FSU and Clemson, that is going to be fascinating to see. You think that Big Ten, again, for FSU, maybe an outside consideration, kind of softening on that. Although it's still possible, it seems like it's getting more stretchy. So maybe the SEC does consider. I don't know exactly for Florida State and Clemson really what the play is, I think you jump at whatever offer you get. If you get both offers, obviously consideration there. But the SEC seems like maybe the place, or maybe starting a new conference.
Oh, okay. Definitely possible. Sergeant Pickles follows up and says, in my limited analysis, football brings in 4 to 5 times the cash of hoops, even at schools like Duke or Kansas.
Mm-hmm. In some conferences, that would be the case, I think. So like a 4 or 5 times, like a 4 times would basically saying 20% of like a media rights agreement would be that. 5 times would be saying 10% of a media rights agreement would be based on basketball. I think that's a little bit low, but depending on your conference and how bad your basketball is, maybe it's like an 85%, 15% split for football, basketball.
Chauncey says, hi, guys. He just wants to stop and say hi. Thank you for joining us, Chauncey. Tempest, you know UNC isn't going to stay.
UNC is not going to stay.
They can't afford to.
UNC cannot afford to stay. And like Moan, I would love to get your perspective on like the NC State UNC situation. Okay, so you have been a supporter of the backpack as far as like both of them going to SEC together, or both of them going to Big Ten together. Is that something that you still think could happen?
I don't. I think that UNC is going to make a viable argument to these legislators that they have to go. At that point, the Wolfpack Back is holding them back. But they're going to have to make assurances. They're going to have to say, hey, look, this is what you guys are making now, and we're going to make sure that you're making very close to that in the future. But and probably guaranteeing a out-of-conference rivalry game every single year.
Mm-hmm.
And they might have to do that with multiple games in the North Carolina. They may have to play Wake Forest as well. As much as that, I'm sure, grieves them.
What is your background, Moan? What is that?
This is my 1940s room.
Ah, gotcha.
Clint Moses says he feels smarter already. Thank you.
Thank you, Clint.
I like math. Sergeant Pickles, I am more sold by the day on Georgia Tech and Miami to the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think that it's making more and more sense, Pickles, that Georgia Tech is the most interesting realignment chess piece, I think, out there, because they, a year ago, 6 months ago, it was like an outside thought that they could be a Big Ten school, and now things are just seemingly fitting into place for Georgia Tech to maybe sneak into the Big Ten conference.
A great travel partner for Miami. I don't know. Big Ten loves nerds. Sam says, when FSU, Clemson, Miami football games on ACC Network draw a lot more than 100,000, FSU on CW drew 1.5 million. So reiterate why you came up with the number you came up for the non-Nielsen game.
I do agree that Florida State and Clemson those games get big ratings, but I'm not aware of a Florida State Clemson game on the ACC Network ever. In fact, Florida State never plays basically on the ACC Network, guys. Like the ACC Network gets games like Wake Forest versus Boston College. The ACC Network gets games with not the biggest brands. And so the assumption that 150,000 viewers per game was just based on conversations, like just reasonable views of like, hey, FS1 gets like 400,000 viewers, and they're not just like behind more of like a paywall like your ACC Network is. For example, in the state of Utah, you can't get the ACC Network. I can't even get it. Unless I probably order some special package and everything, but it's not even available. And so like out in the West and like the Midwest and stuff, it's just not really that well distributed. So I'm making an assumption based on lower brands being on playing games on that network, you're going to inherently get lower viewership no matter what channel. And you're not getting as much distribution on the ACC Network. You're not a primary channel. So 150,000 seemed reasonable.
All right, Mr. Ed Wayner says, in future, if an ACC school is looking for a new coach, we'll spend more money and go the Belichick-Sanders route in hopes to drive TV viewers and get the money back from higher brand payouts. Very true. Again, this goes back to Greg's show earlier today. Read the article. They've only got basically 2 years worth of money to pay Belichick. So on his 5
Yeah,
years.
it's a risk. It is a risk.
And it was the same thing. He brings up a great point. Colorado brought in Deion Sanders, did not have the money to pay him. I believe after one season, they had the money to pay him. So, and this is a great point. I wanted to wait till we got to this comment. This is our friend Fergie. The UVA thing blows my mind because they have done nothing in football forever. UVA is number 66 on Winsipedia. All right, how do we resolve this? Because the most common travel partner discussed with North Carolina is UVA, that the SEC wants into North Carolina and Virginia to complete their footprint of the Southeastern Conference.
How to change the thinking on realignment strategy over the years? Because when I first got into this game and the analysis, it was all about football viewership. But there's just more into this than just viewership. Viewership for football is heavily weighted. It's important and everything. But there's a lot of different things that you need to consider when you're adding a conference-affiliated member here. So UVA, what do they do for the SEC? What the SEC might want from UVA? First off, I think you need UNC before you go for UVA. UNC is a bigger play, a bigger brand. UVA benefits that they add if you have UNC. It gives you a contiguous state right there on top of North Carolina in a very wealthy state with some really seriously political pockets, obviously, in the state of Virginia. So it's also it's a growing state. You've got a basketball, you've got an elite university as far as a research university, as academic rankings and everything. And at the end of the day, while that might not be the number one driver, that's a huge deal still. And the SEC, by and large, is improving its academic footprint. With the addition of Texas, the University of Texas is a dang good school. We all know that and everything. They're a big research school. They've got Florida, Georgia, and Texas now in that conference, and Vanderbilt.
And the Texas A&M, don't leave out the
and Texas. We're talking about a completely different SEC academic-wise and prestige-wise academically than we ever had in the past. This is not SEC of 30, 40 years ago. We're talking about big-time schools, great schools, and I think that the SEC would be looking to add a contiguous state, growing state with a lot of wealth, a lot of influence, basketball brand, and also adding an elite academic university to pair with UNC based on just bettering all the universities currently in the conference. And plus, it would serve as basically fodder for Alabama to whoop on UVA every year. So there's an extra win, too.
And
that's the justification.
It would also give him the oldest rivalry in the South, which I am sure that the SEC would make a very big deal of. And I forgot to add Mizzou. Mizzou is also a very fine research institute. Sam says North Carolina State will be Big 12 with kickback.
Totally agree. And that's NC State actually might rise to a level they've never been at before in the Big 12 with a kickback. If they do get a backpack tax and they have more money coming in than really any other Big 12 school, man, it's almost like, getting away from UNC and all the triangle of schools and stuff, all four schools in the state, and just being the premier brand for Big 12 in that state, I think would be a huge benefit to NC State. I think they would actually perform at a higher level. What do you think about that, Moan, for NC State?
Yeah, I mean, look, NC State, obviously they'd want to go to the Power 2. But
sure,
as Wiseman once quoted, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you get what you need. And I think that's what North Carolina State's going to do. They're going to get what they need. They're going to be a premier brand in the Big 12 and get that Wolfpack kickback. And then we have a differing opinion here from Conundrum. I bet the Big 10 would take UNC with North Carolina State. I think that's a bold proclamation. Conundrum, if you're right on that one, I owe you a Coke. And then Sam fires back, no way Big Ten takes North Carolina State. Better chance North Carolina State goes to the SEC.
When you're talking about two schools from the state of North Carolina going to the SEC, it seems real stretchy. I think that while Carolina, like on the media rights front and everything for the SEC, is not going to be like a big ad, it's not going to really increase the pot for a lot of like folks in the media rights world. There's going to be ancillary benefits with new students and everything. You kind of you don't get the benefit by adding two schools in the state of North Carolina from that. You lose a lot of the benefit of ad. And so I just have a hard time seeing two schools, whether it be Virginia Tech, NC State, UNC, jumping to either the Big Ten or the SEC for that reason.
Absolutely. And now I'm going to put another fly in the honey pot here. I was talking to Greg earlier this week, and I think Duke might be a dark horse candidate for the Big Ten.
No, really?
Yeah. If UNC goes to the SEC, I could see the Big Ten taking Duke.
Yeah.
Doing a Miami, Georgia Tech, Duke travel situation and leaving Kansas alone. I think Kansas could stay in the Big 12. So
I don't think that Kansas is actually like a Big Ten candidate. I know, Mullen, I know that you've got a different take on that. I could see certainly Kansas being an SEC target, certainly, because you had the border war there, like a Missouri rivalry with K, the basketball brand, a new state in the footprint contiguous. There's a lot of things that make sense. You're getting into the Central Time and stuff to open up maybe some new time play spots and everything, new stadium. I see that being a lot more reasonable than the Big Ten going after. I just don't see a lot of upside for KU in the Big Ten, for the Big Ten.
I will have to agree to disagree. Illini Ted says money gaps don't always push action. See Notre Dame. But here's the thing you got to remember, Illini Ted, and I will follow this up with Lee's comment. Thank you, Lee. When UNC leaves the ACC, what does Notre Dame do? I don't see them joining a conference. Important to keep in mind, guys, Notre Dame's television deal with NBC is on a sliding scale. It is based on the numbers they pull in, and that is why they got their scheduling agreement with the ACC to play Clemson, Miami, and Florida State regularly. They basically got to pick their own ACC schedule in order to keep that NBC payment high. Well, if Carolina leaves, other people are going to start looking, guys. And those other people are going to be Florida State, Clemson, and Miami. If those brands leave, who does Notre Dame have left to play? Notre Dame Boston College is not going to bring in a $75 million a year contract from NBC, guys.
Right.
It's not. And, if there's nobody for them to play left in the ACC, I mean, they could try an arrangement with the Big 12. But I don't see Notre Dame doing that. They're going to have to do something. But as we mentioned, that Reaper comes in here.
Make that Reaper dance. Where's that Reaper?
Reaper dance. That Reaper, he is running right now. He is running to Chapel Hill.
The SEC. That Carolina Reaper is running to the SEC right there.
He's taking word from Bubba Cunningham. We're getting out. Daniel Gordby. Florida State brought this up 2 years ago, thinking strategically for the future, went to the ACC, was told to pound sand, and were ridiculed as being disruptive by the media. Great point. You have anything you want to add to that, you?
No, I think that FSU has done exactly what they needed to do. FSU's just made a bunch of money that it wasn't going to come to them anyway by going to the courts. They're going to get a huge swath of this brand initiative share. And they need that to compete, especially with these gaps that we're, showing here for UNC. And FSU is going to have a gap with the baseline SEC and Big Ten team as well. So they had to do it. They had to get that ACC exit fee low. 165 is so doable. Anyone that has a P2 invite, the long math's going to work out. So if FSU does have a Big Ten invite, SEC invite in the future, this was a brilliant play.
Absolutely. We're going to do about 15 more minutes. Does that work for you?
Let's do it.
15 more minutes. We'll try to get to as many comments as we can.
Holy cow, we've had 200 plus comments, Moan.
No, we've had a lot of members viewing. And again, this is a thank you to everybody who's a member of the channel and everybody who gifted members in the channel. This is a thank you stream. We'll probably do some more of these in the future. So definitely leave us comments. Let us know what you think. And as always, this will be going into the member section. You can view it on demand after the fact. If you want to slow it down or if you have any questions, feel free to bother you on Twitter. Daniel Kopp just says, yuck, 98 million is the SEC upside. Unfortunately, Daniel Gorby, FSU took a lot of arrows for trying to share this early.
FSU did what they needed to do. If they wouldn't have squawked at all, FSU would not have known that it was going to be 165 million to get out of the ACC, and they wouldn't be making as much as they are today. It was a stroke of brilliance, guys. Like, I know that it's like unconventional, go to the courts and stuff, but FSU won. They needed to do it, and they're yielding the results. Like 165 million to get out of the ACC is so much dang lower than the estimated 600, 700 million. Man, like that's a stroke of brilliance.
And I'll put it this way. A lot of people are, saying that Florida State and Clemson killed their chances and nobody wants to be with them or nobody wants to work with them now. Look, it's too much. They're worth too much money. They're not going to be left out, guys. They're not. They're worth too much money. The SEC, even though they might grit their teeth, ESPN's going to tell them as part of this new 9-game conference schedule, you're going to get Florida State and Clemson into the SEC. Shonsky, even though Florida State doesn't receive bigger SEC TV revenue, they are still top 20 in total revenue earned for the year. Why travel now? Brings up a great point. Again, this new renegotiated contract pays them more than other teams, but it is dependent on Notre Dame.
And I think a big point here to make is that for the year wording right there. So Florida State's top 20 in total revenue earned for the year, meaning the last year reported, meaning the new contracts haven't kicked in yet. And the new contracts are the ones that are going to be kicking ACC and Big 12 butt versus Big 10 SEC. The new contracts are the backbreakers. They're the gaps, not the old contracts. It's the new look forwards. So this comment, if we looked at it in 2 years, it wouldn't be as it looks like today when we take a historical look at the financials.
And again, that's the new contracts. That is not including the new contracts for a scheduling agreement and 9th conference game.
You're assuming those happen, Moan. We'll see.
Those will happen. Trust me. We got another super chat here for Go Black 45. Thank you, Go Black. I still think UNC and FSU made a deal for Florida State to take all the arrows for them. Then UNC will grease the wheel to get them and Clemson into the SEC.
Oh my gosh.
Could be.
Just imagine that combo there. If UNC, FSU, and Clemson all jump to the SEC, oh man, that would be sweet. I mean, that's big time moves right there.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
Thank you for the super chat, Go Black 45. We appreciate it here. We weren't expecting super chats on this members only special.
Yeah!
I will give you a little clap. Much appreciated, sir.
Give him the Reaper dance. That's my favorite, Moan.
I like Reaper Wave. All right, let me try and get through some more comments. Jay Chapman, I don't care who comes along as long as the SEC gets North Carolina. That man has a singular focus.
North Carolina's become like the heartthrob for the SEC. Like, this thing is absolutely going to happen. Or it's very likely. Absolutely might be too strong a word usage here, but all signs point to North Carolina and the SEC.
Opie Didon, that old Louisiana Swamp Tiger, says, I see 2027 as the first landing in the SEC. So he says they
Bingo.
leave in 2026. They give notice next year on August 15th, and they are in the SEC by 2027.
I agree 100%. That's exactly what I would anticipate. That's exactly got to be the goal for UNC. Like leaving like super early from the ACC isn't that realistic. So really 2027, playing in the SEC first year in 2027 has got to be the target and goal. Just before 2028, do not let that pass you if you go UNC. You've got to get out before 2028.
Sam says the deal UNC gets out gives NCS kickback and East Carolina gets into the ACC. Everybody wins. You know, that's an option too. Don't forget Appalachian State's out there. Happy State. Certainly something to think about. Certainly something that could move legislators.
Some horse trading.
Yeah, some horse trading. Absolutely. Timothy Green's here. He says, hey, y'all, just wanted to say another great show. Thank you for all you do for fans like us. No, thank you for getting us to 200 members. That's what we're doing this for. There will be more like these in the future. I'll keep an eye on when we get those little member milestones, and we'll come up with some stuff.
Moan, give the people the U. Come on. That was requested already. We need the U.
I've got to get 19 more members. As soon as I get 19 more members, I will put a U into there as an emoji. Okay. Now, Mr. Ed Wainer has a very important question here. Would it be an option for the North Carolina Tar Heels to wait until 2030 to leave for the big, pay only $75 million to exit, but then likely get even more money with the new big media deal in 2031? Remember, the Big Ten gets its media deal before the SEC gets their next media deal.
Okay, so to answer the question, going back to the idea of like $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, you're saying here, let's wait 5-6 years. You're falling behind over 5-6 years pretty significantly. We've seen the gaps and everything. I wouldn't recommend that at all as an approach. If that happens, that happens. If you can't get out of the political entanglement, hey, like there's nothing you can do about it. But if you've got a choice, the math says go now, don't wait, because the exit fee is a lot less significant than the upside that you get by jumping over to the P2. Like the exit fee is really kind of like a moot point. And like I know that it tapers down, the exit fee doesn't matter that much compared to really the benefit that you're going to be getting in payouts and ancillary factors. It's so low, guys, that it's really insignificant in a lot of ways, the exit fee amount. When we're talking about how much these schools make, it's crazy.
Sergeant Pickles is here. Kansas is a Big 24 candidate, but that's way down the road. And then I wanted to highlight Bill G. Bill G's given a lot of members to the channel, so a lot of you are being able to see this because of Bill G. Make sure you thank him in the chat. I'm sure he would appreciate it as much as we appreciate him. Thank you, Bill, for stopping in. Kansas is not in the South. That's absolutely true. Kansas is a basketball blue blood, but we'll need to replace Self. Kansas, also longtime AAU member. I would also add, Bill, Kansas is investing in their football program.
Right.
They've got the new stadium. It's going to be tied to a whole district down there. So Kansas is investing in Kansas. We'll see if it pays off with a P2 invite.
It does seem like a good fit for SEC, though, right? The Jayhawks. Like I know that like you've got like the view that you want to see them in the Big Ten, but just leave that aside. Just look at like the fit. Missouri is there already, right? Like basketball is really good right now in the SEC. Like you're with a lot of other AAU-based institutions. Like it just seems like real. Like you've played with Oklahoma and Texas A&M in the past. And Arkansas. Like it's a piece of cake. Like you've got historical matchups there and everything. It's like a glove, Moan.
Listen, I hear what you're saying, but why do you need to be in the same conference to have a rivalry with Minnesota? If Kansas
Missouri?
is in the big, if Kansas is, or Minnesota, yes, Missouri. If Kansas is in the Big Ten and Missouri's in the SEC and they have a scheduling agreement, why can't that just be one of the annual scheduled games? Big Ten, Kansas versus SEC Mizzou.
It certainly could.
Mark Bowman with a $10 super chat just got here. Has there been any discussion about the Wolfpack Backpack? Mark, I will let you go back. We did discuss it. We figured it would be roughly around 10 million per year, 9.8. Not decided on what we call it yet. It's either Carolina Money or it's the Wolfpack Kickback. But we'll figure that out. Thank you for the super chat, sir.
Thank you, Mark.
Little macho man for you.
But the cream will rise to the top. Oh, yeah. Macho madness, yeah.
Thank you for the super chat, sir.
Thank you, Mark. So here's the deal. Check it out. Rewatch the video here and like the different concepts, like the financials broken out. But like, here's the big takeaway. After ACC exit fee, it's $98 million benefit in media rights for UNC to jump to the SEC rather than staying in the ACC. And if you divvied that up, you could afford to pay almost a $10 million Wolfpack Backpack tax to NC State and still break even on the media rights portion. So in other words, you've got like a pretty good swath of money to give out any given year to help NC State along to pay your Carolina Money. It's a lot of money. And then if UNC does jump to the SEC, you're going to get a lot of other benefits outside of media rights. You're going to get increased ticket sales. You're going to get increased private capital investment. Carolina wants private capital. That's going to be a significant bump in the opportunity and like the multiple you're going to get in private capital. Merchandising, corporate sponsorships, it's going to be a big time move for UNC going to the SEC. It's going to generate a lot of revenue we're not even talking about, or it's not even modeled here. And this already is a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Stormy Cyclone says Duke has had 3 8+ win seasons in a row. He's talking about football. Basketball is awesome. They are climbing. They are also investing in football. Brought in Manny Diaz. Last season, the great defensive coordinator out of Penn State. Did very well with them. They kind of had a surge going down the end too. So, although they did have that one game where they looked terrible against Northwestern. Again, Duke, for me, dark horse candidate. Could possibly be in the Big Ten. We'll see. Time will tell.
You wouldn't want to add Duke and Stanford, would you? And Notre Dame?
I think you would. I think you would.
Really?
They love dude. They love nerds in the Big Ten, man.
Like 3 private schools?
You're right. The more private schools you have, it protects you. Remember, Northwestern's being private is what helped protect the Big Ten from some of these original employment caveats that were coming up. So you would have several private schools at that point. USC would be private. Stanford would be private. Northwestern, Duke would be private. Notre Dame would be private. So you'd still have way more. And those are elite research institutions, by the way. Let's not forget that. And the Big Ten likes that as well. So I know, and when you look at things from a black and white football only perspective, some things don't make sense. But from the Big Ten point of view, you got to look at other things.
The nerds.
Bill G says Texas going to Texas. MBM follows up with Texas is the problem of the SEC now.
100%.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I find it hard to believe that they're going to hold so much against Florida State and Clemson. As big of a pain in the ass as Texas and Oklahoma were in the Big 12, they couldn't wait to pounce on them. So, Kempa says FSU closed the casket on the ACC. Here we go. Waving them goodbye.
FSU did, though. That was a huge landmark victory. That was the day that the ACC died, is the day the settlement happened.
They jumped on the grenade. They jumped on the grenade for everybody else in the ACC. And then Tempa says they don't get last rights. They're centers. Well, centers are the ones who need last rights the most, okay? Antoine Johnson joins us. Good to see you, Antoine.
Hey.
Thanks for stopping by. The Big and SEC are not going to make it to new contracts. They are going to be extended. That's a possibility. We do not know. We have to wait and see.
Yes, and if they get extended, then the math gets worse.
Yes,
for the ACC or the Big 12. And so the numbers that we've talked about, again, all the numbers we've talked about are best case scenario for UNC to remain in the ACC. Worst case scenario is pretty bad.
SEC goes to 9 games when they add UNC, Florida State, Clemson, Virginia, thus more money. Great point, Sam, but as you brought up earlier, they can already pay all 4 of those schools full shares in the SEC. They have got 4 slots pro rata guaranteed from ESPN.
That could be the combo, though, right there.
I think that is highly likely to be the combo. The only caveat I have is I don't know about Virginia. I think Virginia would like to go with North Carolina. I don't know that Virginia can afford to go with North Carolina.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that Virginia is politically a lot more difficult than North Carolina is. Where you've got people pulling North Carolina to the south, I think you've got people pulling Virginia to the north.
Do you think Virginia is a Big Ten school?
I think the Big Ten might target it. Because, and I mentioned this before, I think they want to protect that DMA. They don't want to let the SEC get into the DC area for recruiting.
Right.
That is a major, major recruiting hub. They also don't want to let them get in there for the political power. Because UNC, everybody who goes to UNC, probably 80% of them matriculate right down the Beltway to Washington, D.C. Sam says, when SEC plays big every year, I can see Miami versus FSU, Clemson versus Ohio State. Think Kansas goes to Big Ten, plays Mizzou. Okay. MBM says it's the Big 20 now, XX.
Big 20 for Big 12.
We'll have to rework that logo a little bit.
Give us that. We want that Wolfpack backpack in the Big 12. That backpack can come over here. We'll treat them good.
Treat them all right. All right, this will be our last comment, and then we're going to get out of here. We'll do a little final closing statement. We're going to leave. I think the big SEC will get an additional $5 to $10 million a year per school. I don't think it's going to be an additional $20+ million per year per school. Antoine, you bring up a great point. I think depending on the schools they get, it could move those needles a little bit. I think if the Big Ten is able to land Notre Dame, I think it could move that needle to where it's going to be pretty comparable to the SEC.
The contracts, the contracts are just going to get bigger and bigger over time because that's just how sports are. Live sports are desirable content. And with inflation and like the time value of money, like money in the future and stuff is worth less than today. And so it's going to go up always and everything. So it's not going to erode because of live sports. So I think that you're going to see increases in future media rights. I don't know like the percentage increase though. Like I would say that it might be in the $10, $20 million mark per school though.
Okay. Any final comments you would like to make?
Final comment. Here's your numbers. The Carolina Reaper, the net present value of making a decision in media rights for UNC to jump to the SEC is a $263 million decision in the best case scenario for the ACC. And when you subtract out ACC fees for exiting, that equates to an SEC upside of $98 million, approximately $100 million. That's what you want to have. That's the takeaway from this live show.
All right. And with that, I will say the Carolina Reaper says goodbye. And this is the part where WildUte says class is dismissed.
Class is dismissed.